All right, I think we've got it hooked up and working now, so we'll go on. All right, as I said a minute ago, uh, the thesis statements that I had you working on last week seem to be so convoluted and confusing, and without us actually being here to work through these together face to face, I've decided to back off of that, and we're going to do one template for the thesis statement. So I'm going to ask everybody to go back and rewrite your thesis statement before we get into conclusions. All right, I have a template for you here. This is called a closed thesis, and this works well on the AP exam for argument essays. So, and it's easier to remember because there's one way to do it and it works. And it gets you what you need to do, and so that's what we're going to back up and do. So look at the thesis statement, closed thesis statement template here with me for just a minute. Although blank would argue, and that blank is where you put your opposing argument, you explain it, okay? Their argument is not acceptable because, and then you give the main reason why their argument is not acceptable, semicolon. However, comma, I maintain, and then you give your claim, right? Your point. Because, and your list of reasons, period. That's it for your thesis statement. That's called a closed thesis statement because it lists the reasons you're going to be giving. It's brief, right? Very brief, but that takes care of it. That is your introduction. That's your thesis statement. That's all you need for the exam on an argument essay. That will work just fine. You with me? Keep it simple. We include everything that we need to include, and then we move on from there. Okay. Okay, let me close that. Now, are there any questions about this before we move on? So you actually have two things that you're going to do for your assignment today. One is rewrite your thesis. Two is compose your conclusion. So let's talk about conclusions here for a minute. All right. All right, are you there? All right, let's move on then. So let's talk about the purpose of the conclusion in an AP argument essay. It connects to the thesis and answers a question that we asked the first day. And that question was, what do I want my audience to believe and or do? Okay. Everything we're writing in this argument essay is to get our audience to believe something, all right, and possibly do something based upon this new or modified belief that they have. Okay. The believing is our primary. The doing is secondary. You know, you really want people to believe something so that eventually they will do something, but this isn't persuasion. We're not focusing our efforts on the doing, all right? We are focusing our efforts on the believing. So, you know, if we're torn between what we want to do, this is where we focus. All right. Now, notice that the conclusion connects to, but does not restate the thesis. I know for years, a lot of students have been taught to restate the thesis in the conclusion. You don't need to do that. You need to connect to it, make some kind of connection to what you were saying, but you do not just simply restate it. All right, thou shalt not restate the thesis. Now, what do we include? Now, this is pretty, I don't know, pretty colors for one thing, don't you think? Come on, agree. Anyway, this looks like it's a little technical, but it really isn't. So this just kind of gives you an idea of what to include. There are elements you want to include in your conclusion. So you'll need to be referencing back to this page when you're writing your conclusion. All right, number one, what do I want my audience to believe? Why do I want my audience to believe it? What do I want my audience based on this belief to do? Yeah, see that. Anyway, hopefully. Why do I want my audience to do it? And then I'm going to connect to the thesis. Now, look, I have those 5 elements listed and color-coded, but they're not necessarily in that exact order. They just need to be in there. That's an important thing, okay? Because if you try to make everything fit exactly the way I've got it listed, it may or it may not work well for you. This is where you have some freedom. You can incorporate those elements however you choose, just make sure they're in there. Is that, I'm not trying to constrain you like I do in the thesis. The thesis, yes, it's very, follow this, okay? In the conclusion, you can put it together different ways that kind of fit your personality, your style, your writing style, and so on like that. Just incorporate the elements. Now, let's look at this sample one I have on there. When individuals become more aware of the uses and limits of polite speech, they can communicate more effectively and authentically. So that's what I want my audience to believe, that it will help them communicate better, okay? Authentic, not polite speech leads to a clearer understanding of our differences. That's where I connect back to my thesis, all right? And can sometimes lessen the divide between people of opposing views. That's why I want my audience to believe this, because it brings us closer. You with me? So now is the right time to lessen the reliance on polite speech. This is what I want them to do, and move forward or move toward more authentic forms of communication, which will inevitably make our world a kinder place. That's why I want them to do it for future generations. All right. That's pretty in-depth, I know, right? That is your essay without repeating your thesis. Now, I have notes down here. I probably should have put those in bigger letters and bold and all that. Notice that the words in conclusion do not fit on there anywhere. Now, I know that sometimes you're looking for, those transitional elements, and you have a lot of freedom to use transitional elements to lead into your conclusion. I did not put one in there because if I do, everybody copies it. All right? So just don't use in conclusion, and do not have a rhetorical question in there. A lot of folks tend to throw that rhetorical question in their conclusion, and it has no place here. Just trust me on that. All right. Excuse me. So we're going to compose a conclusion that establishes what you want your audience to believe, why you want your audience to believe it, what you want them to do, and why you want them to do it. And then highlight each part of your conclusion in the appropriate color, using the colors on that I gave you on that little template there. And then turn in the conclusion on a separate doc. Now, on the assignment, well, it's not on here. Let me look over here just a second. On the assignment, I said to put both, you see it right here? This is today's assignment. Put both the thesis statement and conclusion on one doc and turn it in for this assignment. I've made it worth double points. It's worth 50 points instead of 25. Okay. So put them on there. Have your thesis first and then your conclusion. Those will be two different. I mean, it's one grade, but it's, I'm going to look at them separately. All right. Does that make sense? All right. What do you need to have clarity on? Something that I'm not making clear? Or no questions? All right, folks. We will get started then, and I'll let you get to it.